soldering. So, close up. Okay. Now, people have asked me about soldering. I've already put flux on here. On part of this, I use a water-soluble water cleanup flux that I get from at Hoy. One of the things that I hear a lot of folks, wondering about, well, my copper foil is discolored. Well, it's going to do that anyway. And the deal with soldering is that your flux's job is to clean up that corrosion. Okay, so when it does that, what happens actually is that it's suspended in the flux itself. Okay, and it's going to collect on your tip. Now, when you're soldering, you should not have to push your solder into the soldering iron tip. If you're having to do that, that's usually a good sign that your tip is filthy and needs to be cleaned. Optimum is to be able to just feed your solder into the side of the tip so that it flows down onto your work and gives you a good bead. Now you go slow and you maintain like a little ball up underneath it, see, like I'm doing, and I'm checking to make sure. The other thing is you want to avoid going back and forth over your line to try to get the so-called perfect bead, okay, because that's how you can lead to heat cracks. Okay, and usually I tell people that if you're soldering and you're incapable of getting a good bead on your first pass, then it counts as a first coat. That does not mean that you should put a first coat on and then go back and resolder. That just means that if you can't get a good bead, you see, like I'm doing here, I'm feeding the solder into the tip. See, I've got that ball that I'm maintaining underneath. Okay. Because basically it's just like putting solder on an edge. You're trying to maintain the surface tension of the liquid solder itself. Is my head in the way?
Oh, it's good.
Okay.
Just moving it back over.
See? And that's the idea, to get a decent bead. And of course, because I already soldered the other side, I may have some drips, which are inevitable in some cases. Doesn't mean that they will happen. Something else that a lot of people aren't aware of is that when you flux an area you're going to solder to, and then you solder where it's been fluxed, if you have to go back and touch something up, you need to add more flux. Because what happens is that the active ingredient in the flux that makes it work as a flux burns off. So it's no longer there. Okay. So, and I have a young lady from next door that is helping the old man with the camera work, making sure that my fat head's not in the way so that this shows up. See what I'm doing there? And if you're going too fast, if you're soldering too fast, sometimes your solder, or if your iron's not hot enough, it looks like or feels like you're frosting a cake, then your iron is usually not hot enough. It shouldn't be, your bead shouldn't be spiky. If it feels like you're trying to frost a cake, or your solder's not going on smoothly like this, then either your tip is dirty or your iron's not hot enough. And even having your iron on a rheostat, it's not like a hose. It's not like a water hose where you turn up the pressure on the water and you get more power. It doesn't always work that way. Because the other thing a lot of folks aren't aware of is that the solder is a heat sink. It's going to suck the heat out of your iron, which if your iron's doing a good job, okay, but it's still, occasionally you need to set the iron down for a minute to let the heat recharge so you can get a decent bead. Look at that. Okay? You don't want to try to pick that up with your iron. Okay, thank you. Just hit this.